Welcome back to the Design, Build, Hunt podcast, which is presented by Whitetail Partners. I've got Jake from Michigan and Dylan from Kansas on the line again. Guys, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, Josh. How are you?
I'm good. We're let's pull back the curtain a little bit. We just got done talking about fruit trees, actually. So this episode is going to air very likely after our fruit tree episode. And we just mentioned a couple things that we should have talked about that we didn't get to in that episode. So I'm already thinking about the next one. So guys, if you like the fruit tree episode, number one, feel free to shoot us a message and ask us some questions if you have specifics. But we're already planning to maybe get a guest on to talk about a few more things when it comes to fruit trees. So excited for that. Very excited for that. So guys, we're sitting here in early April. Can you still call it early April? It's the 10th. It's still early April.
Sure.
Yeah, we're in early April still. A lot of folks are starting to think about their summer food plots, starting to make plans, starting to consider, am I going to grow summer food plots this year? So I thought it'd be a good time for us to sit back and think about the importance of summer food plots, how often those make it into our plans, how much we actually use them on our own properties or possibly even don't use them on our own properties, depending on your specific scenario, and then maybe what you're planting. I think that at least I'm going to be very different down here maybe than some of you guys would be. You two may be pretty similar, kind of being in some states that are known for having a little bit of ag. At least where I'm at in Georgia, we don't really have a lot of that. But anyway, so let's talk summer food plots, guys. First question, yay or nay?
It depends.
There we go. It depends. That is like the ultimate hunting podcast answer.
Yeah,
it depends. Yeah. I mean, it literally everything depends. It's all so situational. What does it depend on for you, Jake?
So I guess like if I'm planting it on my property, I would want to make sure that I have like what are the goals? Like what are we trying to plant? Like are you trying to plant summer soybeans, or are you just trying to have a summer food plot? Like are you trying to continue your fall plots and get into like a no-till rotation? And those are still summer plots in a way, but people don't look at them like a summer food plot. You know, so
Right.
if you're planting, let's say buckwheat, you know, into your standing rye, to start building soil, guys don't think about that as necessarily a summer food plot, but it is. You're still taking time to plant that plot to help build your soil and get ready for fall planting. So I guess really, I like food plots year round on my property, and even like the guys' properties that I'm on. So I like year round plots. So. But like depends on what we're planting. So if we're trying to plant corn or soybeans, which is what I think a lot of guys consider like a summer food plot, then that's where it kind of depends. Like it depends on how much acreage you have to get in there and plant something like that. Like Lee loves his soybeans, right? Lee loves soybeans, right. But I could never plant soybeans on my property because I don't have the acreage to justify it. Like if I planted soybeans, the deer would wipe me out. And so I just wouldn't be able to do it. And I wouldn't plant corn because I don't have the acreage then outside of the corn to then plant my fall crop. Like I want to have something that's green on my property to draw those deer in. Like corn is a good food source in the late season, but it's also kind of like cover. You know, deer are going to seek that more open area in the evening. They want that green food source. They want to kind of be out in the open. They want to be able to see. And so if you have just corn, that's not going to be necessarily as big of a draw as I feel like as your green food plot. So that's why I kind of said it depends. But for me, for the most part, yes, I'm planting food plots on my property. Not necessarily planting it, but I'm continuing my food plots throughout the summer.
Okay. All right. Dylan, don't you dare tell me it depends. No, I'm kidding. What? Yay or nay for you?
I'd say yay. Okay. Some of that's in maintenance of your perennial plots that are going to be kind of year round. But yeah, for me, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. I like to kind of help control the soil and what's growing in it. So I find that just putting more desirable plants in there is better than the weeds and some of the other stuff that's going to come up naturally. Now that's always a struggle and a little bit of a fight. And I'm trying to transition as much as I can. to more of a no-till type practice or minimal till. I don't do a lot of drilling, but I've had really good luck, which is kind of light tillage plus doing more kind of cover crop that I can end up planting into the fall and kind of halfway crimping into that, or more of a top dress, and then break as that breaks down over the top, it really works into that well coming into the fall. But yeah, I'm not looking for perfection either, but I'm a huge fan of soybean plots. When you've got the size, like Jake mentioned, we don't have the density as bad, but what the draw there is we got plenty of soybeans around, but when it comes time to leave them standing, that's where it can be crucial. But yeah, I think there's a huge benefit in the nitrogen fixing, capabilities of all your summer plants and varieties. I've got a couple. I don't know if you want to get into those details. We can do that here later. But yeah, that's something that I think is big for me, is just having that rotational crop. And it's fun. I enjoy getting out to the farm and doing different things. So that's
Yeah.
one other item for all the wildlife.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned there. Like there's a variety. So you've got your soybean plots that are obviously doing their thing, cranking along. Then you've got other perennial plots that are, yes, they're a summer plot, but what you're doing is kind of different there. It's more maintenance. It's not you're not really planting those plots or anything like that. For us, we like to have some variety as well. Obviously, we have perennial plots. Clover is kind of a backbone of our system because it's there when nothing else is. If something happens where a crop fails or something like that, clover is going to be there. At the same time, we've got a lot of our fall and winter crops that we're leaving on through the early spring because it's providing for deer at a really critical, fawning time. It's providing for our turkeys there during a really critical time for them as well. I mean, I love turkey hunting. I'm as passionate about turkey habitat as I am about deer hunting habitat. Um, and so, we're leaving a lot of our fields that either have, wheat or oats or something like that. We're leaving those, allowing those to go to head, letting the crimson clover mature, that kind of stuff, creating not only good food but also good habitat. But then we are taking some places and we are converting them to a traditional, what you might think of as a newly planted food plot that's going into the summer and hopefully going to be feeding deer for us during a really high stress period. Jake, this may not be a high stress period for your deer. Dylan, it might be for yours, but like I know for us, July, August, early September, that can be really hard on the deer down here. When the temperatures are in the 90s every single day, it can be really, really dry. You can really just have a hard time for the deer during that late summer stress period. We don't have the winter stress period. We've got the summer stress period. So it's important for us to have some good stuff that time of year when everything in the woods is just kind of dry and uh, not very kind to the whitetail. So let's talk a little bit about your strategy and thought process when it comes to your summer food plots. I mean, I see you guys designing and I see how strategic a lot of these plantings are, and you've got the edge of one planting butting up against another, and we're steering deer movement with these edges. How strategic are you with your summer plots, and or is it more of a kind of we're just trying to get groceries on the ground?
For
Yeah.
me, go ahead, Dylan.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, that's one thing that for what I'm looking at, I want to make sure and have that crop, growing on into the fall, like we talked about. But some of those, we're going to leave, and they can thrive on their own on into it. But like the soybeans I mentioned, those are gonna last and kind of be more of a late season draw. Some of these other ones are good, milo, sorghums, that kind of thing. They're good kind of in the early stages, the kind of the dough stage, and then again late. But yeah, you mentioned some really good things as far as like having your crimson clover and some of those annuals in there mixed in as well in the fall.
Right.
So I think just having that kind of a mix. I'm more of a kind of a smorgasbord. I know there's certain varieties you want to keep away from others that do better on their own. I like diversity, but also kind of giving those deer kind of something that they remember or know what's drawn. So trying to stick with the same type of rotation as well.
Right, right. Jake?
Yeah, for me, and on clients' properties, it would kind of depend on, like, again, the size of the plot. Like, is this a plot that I'm going to be, convert like planting soybeans or corn, like have that rotation going? Then we're going to be putting it into corn or soybeans. But it is also like on a property that's a little smaller, doesn't have the acreage to justify putting in those plots. Then we're really just carrying in at least like for me, I try to carry my plots into the summer, whether that's with cereal, like I plant my clovers in the fall, my brassicas, my oats, my cereal rye. Then a lot of that stuff carries into the spring. I'll mow all that stuff down around Memorial Day, and then the summer it's kind of left with like just basically maintenance in those plots. So weed control, making sure that there's still food in there. There's still a lot of food in there with that annual clover, or biannual clover, and perennial clover. So the deer have something to eat every single day, along with everything else in the woodlot, because we work on bedding, thickening things up in the timber, and then you're kind of bringing in that perennial plot, which is again a little bit a smaller area into the fall. And what I've been doing lately is I've been waiting for a rain in these are established clover plots. So this is like not year one. This is an established clover plot. I've been waiting for a rain in August, around August 1st or summertime around there. I've been broadcasting my fall mix into that standing clover and then just mowing the clover down to the dirt. And so what happens is the what you broadcast in. So your brassica mix, your oats. I still wait for my cereal rye, but everything else that I'm putting in, my smorgasbord, as Dylan put it, like I love diversity. So all that stuff's going to germinate, and it's going to start growing with the rebounding clover. So the clover is going to rebound with that rain, and then also like the brassicas, the oats, all that stuff's going to germinate and start growing. So as long as you get good timely rains, that works perfect, because then you can kind of get everything that you want in that one spot for the fall. You have all your brassicas in there, you have your grains in there, you have your clover in there, and then that clover again is going to carry into the next year, and then you can broadcast your cereal rye around, at least up here, Labor Day. So then that can help build your soil, and it helps feed the deer all winter long. So that's kind of the rotation that I've been getting into on my personal plots. But again, that's because I don't have the size of the plots to justify putting in soybeans or corn.
Yeah, let's talk about that just a little bit, because that's something that comes up a lot. And I know a lot of guys that I've talked to who have tried their hand at summer plots, and they went with all soybeans or all cowpeas or something like that, and they just get demolished. Like there's nothing left within just a few weeks. What would you say is that like minimum size that people might consider planting a, you know, pure stand of soybeans or pure stand of cowpeas?
It's kind of a moving target on that one, because you don't know like what's the deer density. Do you like if you have the lower your deer density is, and also how much food is in the neighborhood. So if you have kind of an average deer density, but you have a lot of food in the neighborhood, you might be able to get away with maybe like 2 acres or around there of soybeans without those deer just absolutely hammering it, hammering it to the ground. But let's say you're the only game in town. You're the only food plot in the neighborhood, and you have a high deer density. You put in an acre or 2 acres of soybeans, they're gonna eat the whole thing. And so that's where you got to have more of a browse tolerant uh, food plot. It's not that you can't put in soybeans, just understand that they're going to get mowed to the ground. So you can plant soybeans for the summer, have them come up, let the deer eat them, and then it kind of acts as weed control a little bit for your fall plot. Then you just go and broadcast your fall plot into the stubble that's left over. So just understand that you're not going to be able to carry those soybeans into late season. And if we do have an area that on one of our properties that we lease from one of our neighbors. It's a big field, and we put that into soybeans every year. So we do put that into soybeans, and we kind of have corn on the backside to act as a screen. We just kind of access. We don't access from the corn side. We access from the other side and hunt the soybeans. But then that allows the deer to have just like this sanctuary plot that no one really ever goes to or hunts. But I want to say it's like 5 acres in size. We have a high deer density, and we have a lot of food nearby, but that's probably around a 5 acre chunk that we section off for corn and soybeans.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Dylan, is that similar for what you're seeing as far as like minimum size that you should be going for when it comes to, a soybean?
Yeah, I tell you, we can get away with a little bit smaller. I've done that just in some of the areas that I've talked about with the lower deer density. I've done them as small as an acre. I mean, they get hammered pretty good, but they're still. I was surprised that and obviously that's some of mine were coming in after like a native grass stand, and had some of the best looking soybeans ever in that first year. So, they've got so much around our general area to feed on for those destination sources that they don't seem to get the pressure like you would maybe in an area that doesn't have a lot of actual soybean, large crop fields. So maybe that's part of it too. But yeah, I've had really good luck with some smaller plots, but I also mix in some variety, usually on the edges and stuff like that. So they're not taking all of the pressure onto those soybeans.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of things that I've done that have, you know, helped me get away with or have clients get away with a little bit smaller, bean plot somewhere in the 1.5 to 2 or 3 acre range is if you time it well with a burn in the area where that burn is kind of hitting peak production about the times that those soybeans are coming up. So it would be a growing season burn, which a lot of people don't want to do or haven't done or aren't comfortable with. But if you can do a growing season burn, have a lot of that browse coming on about the time those soybeans are starting to germinate, you can really get away with a lot. Because if once you get those soybeans past that, those first couple of inches and get a couple of good rains on it, then it's like, okay, they can kind of keep up with the browse. But if they're nipping them as soon as they emerge from the ground, you're never going to get them established. So that's one thing that I've done, but then also planting soybeans in a blend. And you're not doing it for the pods at that point, obviously. But if you're planting soybeans in a blend with, several other things, maybe it's got some sun hemp in it, some sunflower in it, it's got some cowpeas in it, it's got some, oh gosh, what else is in this blend? It's like truly a kitchen sink kind of blend. And we've had good success with that actually. And it leaves a lot of material up on top of the ground. So it's really helpful for moving towards a no-till type of system. So it's not a true soybean field, but there's a lot of beans in it and there's a lot of cowpeas in it. And so a lot of protein, lots of tonnage, lots of food for the deer, and has worked pretty well. What are some of those maybe off the wall kind of summertime crops? Because summer crops, I don't feel like get the same amount of press. Like if it's not soybeans and corn, you don't hear a lot about, hey, this is a great summer food plot. Like what are some of those things that maybe you guys like in those off the wall areas that may be an annual summer food plot blend?
So I guess I'll throw like a weird one in here. It's something that I try to incorporate into a lot of my habitat plans. Is it's beneficial to because as a summer food source and a little bit of an late summer and potentially early fall, and it helps your soft mass, which we just talked about last episode, and that's a pollinator mix. So if you have the
Mhm.
opportunity to planting like a wildflower mix or a pollinator mix, deer that's all food for the deer. Whether it you know everything in there, the goldenrod. There's a lot of times there's clover in there. Those perennial sunflowers, like everything in there, they're going to browse on. So that's just kind of one that a lot of guys don't think about is that pollinator mix. And what I kind of do with that is if a guy has a lot of space, you can kind of design this food plot system in there. I'll kind of put those pollinator mixes on the inside of the food plot. So you like to a lot of times access from the outside of the food plot, so you're not disturbing deer along the interior. But then you'll ring the food plot with switchgrass, and then you'll kind of carve out this area within the switchgrass and plant a pollinator in there. So you might have a 1/4 acre of pollinator, so it's a good chunk, and that'll act as one bedding because deer like to bed in that stuff. It gets pretty tall, and also it's a food source throughout the summer, and also late summer and potentially early fall.
Right. Right. Dylan, what comes to mind for you for like a good annual, summer food plot that's not not a soybean?
Yeah, that's it's hands down Milo for me, and it's for a lot of reasons. What's crazy is it used to be prevalent. I mean, there was before all these hybrid corns and hill country corns were provided and really established. The Milo was everywhere, and I didn't realize how good it was. I mean, I can remember talking to farmers and saying, "Oh yeah, there was deer jumping out of here like crazy when we were harvesting," and just didn't think much of it. Didn't really have it as even a key food source. But now that it's not everywhere, it is absolutely dynamite. Like I said, it's good in that early stage, and then again late. Not only are you helping your deer, I mean the birds absolutely love it. It's also what it's super drought tolerant. You can get away with, say you struggle getting another crop in, or if you want to plant something else, you can plant milo really late. And it's one of those that kind of saves you. And the other thing that I like about milo is it's for the following season, as far as not doing a bunch of tilling, it is unbelievable for weed suppressant. And
Okay.
yeah, and so it also holds that moisture in the soil. It canopies pretty quick, and I just really like it. It's one of those. I think it's good to kind of mix in some other crops and off years from it. For whatever reason, it seems to kind of make the soil a little bit harder than I like it, or kind of almost crusty. But yeah, that's also why I like to kind of change out those plots anyway, just keeping the diversity and fixing nitrogen and doing different things in there. But milo is really good, and I've had good luck mixing it with soybeans also to take pressure off, and just broadcast seeding it. It's simple to grow. It's just something that almost anybody can do. You can do it with ATV, low equipment. You can drill it. I mean, it's just kind of the sky's the limit with a lot of this stuff. And I think there's a million different ways to skin this cat and find out what your deer prefer.
Right. That reminds me, back when I was a kid, there was a guy on a lease. We were in a very large lease in Alabama growing up, and 3,600 acres that we got to manage, which all one block. So 3,600 acres. As a kid, I might as well have been in the back country of Alaska. Like it's what it felt like when I was in the middle of this place. But there was a guy there that always talked about his personal spot and what he did every year for every summer and then every fall. He would go to Walmart and he would buy a bag of bird seed and he would till his ground and he would just throw out bird seed in his food plots. And he's like, I don't know what's growing, but the deer like it. And that was kind of his food plot strategy. So he'd do that twice a year. He'd go till it and he'd throw out a bunch of bird seed and that was it. But you started mentioning milo and I was like, yeah, I bet he had a lot of milo in that mix.
Yeah.
Bet there was a lot of milo. Have you guys had experience with either joint vetch or Alice clover?
Nope.
I've planted in very small quantity, mostly as a mix. For those annual plots, I've thrown that in there. I can't really say for certain how desirable it was, but I know that Alice seemed to be a really good draw, and it actually seemed to be pretty prolific and grew to pretty good size. But
Right.
no, not as a sole establishment. It's always been in another mix. So I couldn't really get a great result.
Right. So we've got some clover plots that we were trying to establish last year. We had a terrible drought, and needless to say, a perennial white clover didn't do real well with a drought in clay soil. I don't know why not. I don't know what happened, but they didn't do well. So those plots are struggling. So we're trying to think about what we could do to go in there and broadcast now. And Alice clover's come up to my attention just because you can plant it April, May, June here in Georgia, and it will be just fine. And so that's one thing that we're considering. So I wanted to see if you guys have done that yet, but it supposedly ranks somewhere in like that mid level for deer preference. So it's not like a strongly preferred, crop or anything like that. American joint vetch though has been really good for us during the summer, especially in really really wet spots. So I don't know if you can even grow that far north, Jake. But I think about some of those spots in Michigan that are really low, and some of your properties that are kind of harder to get a food plot on. Like joint vetch could be a good option.
I think you can grow it. I think you
Can
can
you?
grow it. I just haven't done it yet. I
Right.
personally have not planted it yet, so I don't like to comment on something that I haven't done.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I'll comment on things I haven't done. I'll just throw it out.
Yeah.
No, I'll just throw it out there. No, I've done a little bit of American joint vetch when I lived in Louisiana. We had a property that it just wasn't going to grow a lot of anything else. It was all lowland stuff. So, well, let's talk about how this plays into your thinking about your fall food plots. So, I know one thing for me is I'm designing these plots. My summer plot, because of what it's going to look like with the blend that I'm typically installing with cowpeas and sunflowers and soybeans that are going to grow really tall because they're a forage soybean and they're going to be climbing all over the sun hemp and the sunflower and everything else. That plays into my thought process when it comes to architecture for food plots in the fall. How much are you considering your fall food plots and your fall strategy when it comes to what you're doing in the summer?
Yeah, I'll speak to that, Josh. Just briefly here, that blend mentioning right there is very similar to one that I've been a fan of from Green Cover that I use. It's called a Summer Release, and it's got all of that in there. And I'll leave it a lot of times. I'll have a plan to kind of leave my perimeter where I'm kind of trying to create that edge, and then I'll come just inside of that a couple tractor widths or whatever, and start my fall blend into that and leave the rest of that standing. And it seems to work pretty well. But there again, that's another product there that's going to break down, and you can use that as kind of a slow release fertilizer,
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's a great plan to have, or at least have an idea of how you're going to plan that and envision that when you're setting up here in the spring. You just got to kind of have that in mind as you do it, not to mention the orders and having all that in line. We like to get in the habit of procrastinating, and then you're kind of scrambling for seed and trying to come up with a plan. I think right now is the best time, if not maybe a touch late. You really kind of get these things in your mind and start thinking about that, because we're building this all for the next season. And that's what's fun about it. Just kind of coming up with that strategy.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Jake, you have anything to add on that?
No, I guess piggyback off what Dylan said there. Like you need to have that game plan. So everything that we're doing, we're planning for the fall. So we're not trying to plant the summer plot necessarily. Like I guess in some spots you're trying to plant it for the protein and antler growth, health of the herd, all that. But really, we care more about the fall plots because those are the plots that are going to be attractive on our property when we're trying to encourage deer movement, right? So that
Right.
for me, when I'm designing a property, it's always for the fall. And how those deer are going to move through that property throughout the fall. So like what Dylan said, make sure you have a plan, regardless of what you're putting in your summer plots. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you time it up right, so that whenever that planting date is for you, for us here in Michigan, it's kind of that first rain after August 1st, that your summer plots are kind of winding down. Either you're gonna kind of till them back under, or you're gonna plant into your summer food plot, or you're going to leave your soybeans standing throughout the season, maybe broadcast into the standing soybeans to I know you can kind of, as they start to turn brown, that you get more sunlight to the soil. You can start to broadcast some annual clovers, some rye into there, maybe some brassicas, just to get some more diversity in there. But make sure you have a plan, like Dylan said, for your fall plots, because that's what's going to be the draw throughout the entire hunting season. That's what's going to get the deer to move from point A to point B. That's the movement you're going to be hunting. So I'd say that's the most important thing, is just make sure that you have that plan to make sure that you have a successful fall plot.
Right. Right. So I guess one thing to maybe leave people with is there's a lot too that you can do um, for quality forage during the summer that doesn't include a food plot necessarily. One of the big things for us down here is strip disking. So I don't know. They do a lot of that out in like Oklahoma, Kansas area. Lots of strip disking out there. I don't know if they do a lot of it in Michigan, but for us, if you're able to get a disc into certain locations, or even go disc your food plots lightly after the season, February, March, um, if you're not worried about weeds in your food plot. So I'm not a a food plot farmer where like I see weeds in my plot and I'm like, no, I've got to kill it. I'm just like, hey, it's more deer food. I'm okay with that. And so I will actually, from time to time, encourage weeds in the food plot to run in strips of, disking the edges of the food plot and right down the middle sometimes, and allowing that to come back with whatever's in the seed bank. And you end up with, partridge pea, and you end up with ragweed, and you end up with, a little bit of everything growing up right there in the middle of your plot. All of that stuff's really high quality forage for deer, and it's free, and you didn't have to plant it, and you didn't have to hardly touch a thing besides drive the tractor around for a little bit. Are there any other methods that people can use to get high quality forage on their properties that during the summertime, because people are thinking, I want to grow antlers, I want to grow antlers, I want to grow antlers, and that's great, but deer are doing a lot of antler growing before those soybeans are ever up.
Yeah.
Deer
So
deer are raising fawns before those soybeans are ever up. So what are you guys doing?
and you nailed it right there. Like, so if you want to try to jump start like an old field, start turning that soil over, turn those seeds over, start that growth process. A lot of times what we're doing is we're just dropping trees in the timber, create that to create
Right.
bedding. That'll, early successional growth will kind of, all those new trees, the ragweed, the the goldenrod, the pokeweed. You mentioned that one earlier. That's a great one for protein for the deer. And what I'll say is, like, I like that stuff, and I even mentioned, planting pollinator mixes. I
Right.
really like that stuff, but I like it outside of my food plot. So I am one of those guys that's a little bit more anal about what's coming
I
up
could
in my
tell
food
from you
plot.
laughing. Yeah, I could. You were laughing a minute ago when I said I'm not worried about it, and you started
Yeah,
laughing. Jake's
but I
worried
think
about
I think it's okay though, because we're in different regions. Like for
it. Right.
you,
Exactly.
those weeds, those are deer food throughout the entire season for you, right? You're down
Right.
in Georgia; they are
Oh yeah.
continuing to grow throughout
Yep.
the entire season, so that's a
Yep.
draw for the herd. For me, that's a draw during the summer, and so
Right.
like those pollinator mixes and all that stuff, those forbs, that's a draw during the summer, which is great. I want that stuff on my property as much as possible, but I want it in certain locations. I don't
Yeah.
necessarily want it in my food plot, because if my food plot was dominated by that stuff, let's say 30% of my food plot were those annual or perennial weeds. Yeah, that's deer food, but all those dandelions or ragweed after the frost hits, that's dead. And that's not going to provide any food for the deer anymore. And we get a frost in mid-October. So
Right.
that means most of my hunting season now, 30% of my food plot wouldn't be performing for me. And so I am a little bit more anal about my weeds, just because I want my food plot to be performing as best as it can throughout the entire season. But that's up here where those weeds do go dormant and they don't offer anything for deer anymore. Down where you are, they do provide food for the entire season for the most part. So that's just what shows, like, we're just different regions, so we have a different approach.
That's such a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Like I hadn't even thought about how important that is for a more northerly type of climate to be thinking like, no, you need every square inch of that plot producing at peak performance. Like it's all got to be doing something. And
Yeah.
down here, I don't really have to worry about it. Because like you said, that's food on into the fall for us. I mean
Mhm.
that stuff's great all year. So very interesting, very interesting. Guys, we've been going for a little while here on summer food plots. So anything else that you want to leave people with or throw out there as maybe something to try as people are thinking about maybe trying to get their head wrapped around a summer food plot strategy that's right for them and their context?
Yeah, I got one real quick, Josh. And this may be more regional dependent, but if there's some listeners in this area, that'd be great. I think it's something I found out on accident. And absolutely was the best fall hunting I ever had, and it was kind of through accident, or at least me not paying attention to it. And that's we've got double crop here, so we get wheat that gets harvested right around 4th of July, roughly. So by mid-July, they're going in and they're trying to get another crop, so they'll throw beans in there. And some years great, some years subpar. But the one thing I've really found, and if you're hunting like terrace country or stuff like that, um, those beans seem to produce on the pod much lower on the stem, and so those pods are down low, and so they don't get harvested in a lot of the areas that have rolling terrain. And I'm not kidding; it was kind of like right at the end of October, early November, and those were still green, and it was an absolute magnet. And then I found more sheds that year in that spot than I've ever found, and farmers are kind of getting away from it a little bit. But it's one thing that if you were getting behind, be a great option to do is plant them late, uh, let that extend into your hunting season, especially if you're a muzzleloader or early season type hunter. There's properties that set up really well for that. I don't key on that time of year as much myself, but kind of like Jake said, that's I've found that out on accident as well. Going in and we do some summer growing season burns, and just through by accident going in and strip disc in some areas, found out that was a major draw for the deer. And actually for Kansas, we're a little bit behind Jake, but so we can get a couple more weeks out of it. Some of that new growth and stuff that'll get you into October. So that's another good strategy if you can do some of them later burns. Basically, a different growing season type burn, which is going to
Right.
more inhibit woody growth and that kind of thing. But old fields and stuff, that's a great time. And that strip disc and was just like a little candy shop there for a while. So that's something I learned by accident.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's close with this because I know I have heard this question before and I've asked this question before. When is it too late? Like at what point in the summer or late spring, at what point am I thinking to myself, it's too far gone. I've just got to put my eggs in the fall basket. I missed the boat when it comes to summer food plots. let's just shift gears and start thinking fall?
So I guess it depends on what they want to plant, right? So like if
Right.
you're or what's in the food plot right now, are you trying to establish a brand new plot? What's your soil like? Uh, so your game plan is fall plot, and so if you're coming with a brand new one, for me, I like to take that first year and address my weeds. If I'm bringing in a fall plot to the next season, then you kind of got some time. Like if you could even let a lot of, like, if you, let's say you broadcasted rye, Labor Day, all that stuff is coming back. You got busy early summer. You can let that stuff kind of go to seed. It's a lot of, it's good for turkeys. It's good for fawning. You can just let that stuff go a little bit. Just let it reseed, and then just, in July, start to mow it down, and then kind of reset it, and then kind of get ready for fall. But I guess if you're trying to plant like buckwheat or something like that, then you are a little bit on a timetable, because you want to make sure that buckwheat it's tall enough to do its job, smother those weeds, but make sure you don't plant it early enough to where it's going to seed. So you kind of got like a 6 to 8 week window there. So for us here, it's like mid-June. So I guess it kind of depends on what their goal is. What are they putting in? Um, but for me, I bet you the the window on like when it's too late. I don't know, maybe like mid-June. I
Yeah.
don't know, just throwing something out there.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Dylan, what about you? Is there a too
Yeah.
late?
That'd probably be similar for me as well. But I guess one thing I'd say to that is it's not really ever too late, technically, as far as there's always something to be doing. So whether that's planting it or not, you're never too late, because you can be working on establishing that fall plot,
Right.
like Jake mentioned, with the site prep and making sure that you're setting that up for success. And yeah, that's a tough thing to answer, because I feel like you're a little bit late, maybe in the planting, but there's always some prep work or something else you can do to make it that much easier come fall.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, guys, thanks for the conversation. I appreciate it. Folks, I hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions about summer plots, you can send them all to Jake. He'll answer them all.
Yep.
He's got all the he's
All
got all
kinds
the
of
answers.
time.
Yeah. Now, if you've got questions about summer plots, please do reach out to us. Find us on Instagram. Go to our website. We'd be happy to chat with you.